Happy New Year, Rotarians. Hope you're all well. Welcome to meeting number 5326, and thank you to the Gala Committee for doing the greeting line today. Yes, thank you. And guest introductions, or well, any guests, whether you're with a member or not, please come up to the microphone and introduce your guests. Mike, I think I'm right on the edge of getting echo feedback up here, if you could. Go ahead, Mike. Hold on, Mike, just one second.
Thank you very much. I promise to guide my honor to present an old friend and from India, Ahmad, and I will be other people in the club to teach this at their home.
Welcome, Dr. Ahmad. Mike Locke.
President Steve, my pleasure. Mike Locke, Building Construction. My pleasure to introduce on our land from Sacred Heart Community Service. Sacred Heart Community Service has been a long time partner.
Welcome. Interestingly, Mike Block and I think, met at a Sacred Heart Community Service golf tournament about 50 years ago. Mark Lazzarini.
President Steve, this is Josh Grothworth with Salvation Army, overseeing 4th Street Salvation Army, the director of Donor Relations.
Welcome, Josh. I told Josh our group is much in need of salvation, so he'll fit right in here. In fact, speaking of salvation or needing salvation, Ron Zrake.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. President. Nice to see you. Happy New Year, Ron Zrake, Public Accounting. We heard Bert was serving booze this afternoon, so my wife Elise decided to join me for the Rotary lunch, and we'll see how well we do at work after this. Happy New Year, everybody.
Well, welcome, Elise. And coincidentally, the last time I saw Ron and Elise, they were having cocktails. So I don't know if it's a pattern. Any other guests? Well, thanks and welcome to all you guests. Please come visit us anytime you like. We have a new member introduction. My friend Heather Lerner is going to come on up, and we've got Trisha Creason Valencia, I think, on Zoom. Let's see if we can make that happen. Heather.
Thank you, Steve. I kind of feel like Miss Marianne from Romper Room, like maybe most people are on screen and I can pretend to see them. Like, I see Lenore, I see Pam. Hi, friends. I hope you're there. Seriously. I am here today to introduce new member Trisha Creason Valencia. Just a few things to say about her. I want you to know that she has her own production company, Flock of Films, where she's a director and a producer of social issues documentaries. A lot of you in the nonprofit know Trisha. She's definitely a bestie to so many of us, telling our stories and also telling the story of San Jose. You know, I'm a big San Jose fangirl, so I'm especially thankful to Trisha for telling the stories of San Jose. Trisha, take it away with your intro.
Thank you, Heather. So I was coached that rather than reading my bio, I should share fun facts about myself. So I have 10 fun facts I'm going to share with you all. And because of my love of film, I'm going to go with a theme of art imitates life and the personal is political. Okay. So number 1, I was the first girl in my county to play Little League Baseball when I was 8 years old. And my favorite movie at that time was The Bad News Bears. Number 2, I was a PEP commissioner in high school, which may not surprise those of you who know me in person, but I also played on the basketball team. You can't tell from Zoom, but I'm 6 feet tall. I was the first woman in my family to go to college. I attended UC Berkeley. Go Bears. My first job after college, I worked as a translator in Cuernavaca, Mexico. And when I came back to the United States, I ran young feminist clubs in high schools talking about violence against women and girls issues, which led me to produce a public service announcement about that issue, which led me to attend film school in my late 20s. in terms of art imitates life, my first film when I was in film school was about women who had been cheerleaders in high school, women of color who went on to become activists in their community. So that gives you a sense of the kind of work that I had fun making in my early days as a filmmaker. I'm married to a rabbi, and we spent our first year married in Beersheba, Israel. And while I was living in Israel, I edited a lot of video for the Light Opera of the Negev. So my film and personal lives convened at that time. I played roller derby for the Silicon Valley Roller Girls for 5 years. I was head of community service there. I led all of our community service projects, and my number that I wore on my arm was 416, which those of you that know California Penal Code might recognize as failure to disperse after a riot. So that was my number. And my name is Documental, which is a nod to my documentary filmmaking life. My derby friends call me Mental. I've been involved in local theater for many years with children's musical theater. I'm a props coordinator there. Nothing comes between me and my glue gun. I love making props. Connected to that, I love social history and I love costumes. I own a very cool American Revolutionary era bonnet that I wear randomly at different times because I love it. And that social history tied into me directing Changing Boundaries, History of San Jose, which Heather referenced. I love archival footage and archival filmmaking. And I love to coach kids' sports. I've coached my son Elijah and my daughter Dahlia in basketball, softball, baseball, roller derby, and most recently this summer, I taught the cast of Starlight Express how to roller skate. So that is 10 fun facts about Trisha Creason Valencia. Thank you.
Let's give Trisha a Rotary welcome. Thank you, and Trisha, hopefully we'll see you soon as you get over all of your challenges at home. Next up, Vince Sanzeri is going to come up and tell us about the next big project. So Vince has headed a committee of I think a dozen or so people that has been working diligently, literally for years. So let's give Vince a round of applause for all the work that he and his committee have done.
Thanks, Steve. Isn't it nice to see a picture and you don't quite look that way anymore? Time to refresh the photo. Happy New Year to all of you. I'm looking forward to providing an update on the project. It's been a while since we've been up here to tell you what's going on. Slides, do I move forward or they move forward? Okay, great. So next big project, for those of you who might be new to this or don't remember, our committee has been working for 2.5 years on identifying a project. We vetted nearly 40 different ideas. You can see there's 14 different committee members, very dedicated. It's now sort of like a second family since we've spent so much time together, meeting nearly every other week for 2.5 years. And the goal essentially was to have approximately $500,000 targeted for an impact project in our community. In May, June, we brought the idea to the board, and essentially this was the project idea, the San Jose Rotary Health Center. We had over 250 Rotarians vote for this project, and out of all of the votes, we had one negative vote. Everybody was in favor of it, so very excited about that. The project essentially was slated, the San Jose Rotary Health Center in collaboration with Santa Clara County, the Valley Medical Foundation, Home First, which is the main facility, and Rotacare. And there were 3 parts of this. One was an expansion of a health clinic. The second part of this would be a new home for Rotacare, which is currently at Washington School, and then other enhancements overall. And as you can imagine, there's always challenges with projects. So we've been dealing with the hurdles, a lot of different hurdles, whether it's a lease agreement between the county that actually leases the location of the health facility through Home First, conditional use permits and so forth. But I can't tell you how disheartened I am to tell you that we actually had to terminate our involvement in this project. So difficult to come up here and provide that kind of update, especially after this much time. The main hurdle that we faced essentially was related to Rotacare. This was going to be a new home for Rotacare. They would share the health facility. And we knew there was a challenge with respect to minors being at the facility. It actually wasn't until recent that we understood the reason why minors couldn't be at this facility. Now, Home First is just an incredible organization. Andrea Urton, the CEO, is a member of our club. She does just amazing work in this valley for the unhoused. But they also, in just complete transparency, do take in a lot of 290 registrants, sexual offenders. You cannot have minors anywhere, not only inside the gate, but even a distance outside the gate. And the families that come there for services from Rotacare at times may need to bring their children as interpreters for them. Their children may be sick and they may need to bring them along. There's absolutely no way that we could get around this particular challenge. And with Rotacare not being in this location, it had a whole host of other things that sort of tipped the dominoes over and required us to exit this project. The expansion is still going to move forward. So the county is doing terrific work in trying to expand that facility. So we're very excited about that. I mean, all the partners that we had were very, very gracious in understanding this. We're not done. So what we're doing essentially is we've now broken up into 3 subcommittees. The core subcommittee is looking at, can we identify a new home for Rotacare? So we haven't given up on that. That may be brick and mortar. It may be actually a mobile clinic. There's a lot of things we're looking at to see if we can make that happen. Secondly, we have some committee members that are also going back and looking at old ideas and possibly new ideas that could be moved forward. And then we have another subgroup that's looking at what have we learned over the last 2.5 years to help future committees that work on these kinds of projects. Remember, we had $500,000 allocated, and this was going to be nearly a $3 million project. Huge, huge impact, and that's what we're excited about. We hope to make a big impact in the community. We will report to you back in the future. Good news, not a single dime of the $500,000 has been committed. There's also been an enhancement at Home First with the benefit of some of our committee members, Terry Chapman, who's here today on our committee with Pause to Consider, and Patrick Frawley. We actually have a grant that was given to Home First to improve their kennel facility. A lot of unhoused do have pets, and that will be a nice enhancement for them. So there are some good things that have come out of this so far. So Steve, thank you for your time. Appreciate the support. Thank you.
Thank you again to Vince and his committee. They've probably done more work in the last 2.5 years than any group of Rotarians. So thank you again, Vince. Next up, from the ridiculous to the sublime, or vice versa, Nancy Williams is going to come up and talk about the gala. Come on up, Nancy. Well, Gala is another group that does an immense amount of work. Those of you who've worked on it know how much fun it is. So please give Nancy a nice welcome.
Okay, this is weird. I don't like looking at myself on the screen. Somebody else mentioned something about that. Well, first of all, in order for you to really comprehend what our theme is going to be at this year's gala, and actually, before I say that, I should go back a little bit. There is going to be a gala. There is truly going to be a gala. Again, you know, we have to like knock on wood vigorously. Everybody knock on wood. I believe we're 99.9% sure there is going to be a gala, and it is going to be indoors. It is going to be safe. We're probably going to do pretty much what we do in a normal gala year, except that instead of tables of 10, we will have tables of 8 to give you a little more elbow room. We're going to space the tables out a little more, and other things just to keep things safe. But more to come on that. In order for you to truly comprehend the theme of this year's gala, I need you to go back into the Wayback Machine. So everybody real quick, just kind of go back into the Wayback Machine and think, March of 2020. I know it seems like a long time ago, but March of 2020, we were 2 weeks away from having it's done, paid for, and we canceled. So this year, I'm pleased to announce that we are bringing back the Razzmatazz Jazz Club. And on March 19th, 2022, we will finally have the gala that never was. As you recall, we changed the theme to the Pants Schmance virtual, whatever that was. Anyway, so we're finally going to do it. We're going to transition. We're going to transport you to Greenwich Village, 1960, and we're going to bring you to the brand new opened Razzmatazz Jazz Club with big band or jazz orchestra, dancing, great food. We're still searching for a caterer. If anyone has any suggestions, let us know. But it's going to be a great night. So what you can do right now is, one, save the date, March 19th. It's only 2.5 months away, not even. Two, if you would like to sponsor the event, we'd love to have you. Remember, this is the #1 fundraiser for our club. Three, buy a ticket. We're going to start selling tickets at the back of the Summit Center here today. Here after lunches in 2 weeks. Four, donate an auction item. We have had some very cool auction items over the last few years. And one thing that we are saving from prior years is we are still going to do a virtual auction. So even if you can't come to the gala, you will still be able to purchase auction items online. So that's about all I have to say, but please support the gala, get the word out, start shopping for your gown. But we are having a gala, come hell or high water. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, for all the hard work and the creativity. I'm going to take a minute and share my goals for this year, and then in a moment we'll bring up Suzanne St. John Crane, who will introduce today's speaker. It became obvious to me when I became president that this work related to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the club is something that we all need to be working on constantly, probably into the distant future. This is a giant project for us, for our society, and for the world. So I'm going to be forming a committee to help me work on this just for the next 6 months, which is while I'm around before you get Sal. And I'll be inviting some of you to be on that committee, and I'd invite any of you to share creative ideas that you have to make our club better and more diverse. Thanks. Also, the theme for my year is about downtown. This is our time, and I really believe that this is a unique moment in the 200+ year history of our city for a radical transformation to happen. And so we'll continue to try to have speakers, and we might call them mini speakers, talking about initiatives that are exciting for our downtown. Membership is always something that needs to be worked on. Matt Bell, who's the chair of membership, will be here in a couple of weeks talking about what we've achieved in the first 6 months, what we're trying to achieve in the second 6 months. Any of you who stood up for Rotary at my first meeting and got wristbands, I don't know if any of you remember that, feels like ancient history, but please work on getting new members. We'll be doing an update, and any of you who don't have wristbands and would like a wristband, you can get one from me anytime. They're right up here in the lectern, and it simply means that you are committed to bringing in a new member during my term, which ends at the end of June of this year. And finally, I'd say my biggest goal of all is just to spread Rotary Joy more than we have in the past. Those people who aren't in Rotary really don't understand who we are and what we do. We've got a wonderful social media and PR committee that's trying to do a better job of sharing with our community and the world what we do. And the reason we're all here is that we know this is an incredible place to work with like-minded people to do beautiful work to make the world a better place. So I'll continue to work on that. So with that, Suzanne St. John Crane. Suzanne, are you in the room yet? Wonderful. And Ahmad, come on up too, and Suzanne will introduce you, and we'll have a wonderful speech. So with that, my friend, Suzanne St. John Crane.
Okay. Hi, welcome to 2022. How are we all doing? Woo, okay. Good afternoon, Rotarians. We're starting off this year with a bang, welcoming the CEO of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group to our club to speak here in person, Ahmad Thomas. SVLG members provide nearly 1 of every 3 private sector jobs in Silicon Valley and contribute more than $3 trillion to the worldwide economy each year. So in his first year as CEO, Thomas has catalyzed industry-leading initiatives to operationalize change around Steve was just talking about this, diversity, equity, and inclusion from the boardroom to the C-suites and beyond. A former investment banker and senior congressional aide, he brings nearly 20 years of experience working both in and on behalf of nonprofit social enterprises, governments, and businesses, where he's honed a deep understanding of the essentiality of public-private partnerships and the intersection of equity policy and technology that drives Silicon Valley innovation infrastructure. Prior to joining Svlg, Thomas worked for a decade as an investment banker at Barclays, where he managed over $15 billion in debt financings. He has served as senior aide to U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein in Washington, D.C., advising on finance and economic policy. I was super excited to hear, and I know you will be thrilled to hear, that he's an avid football and Bay Area sports fan, wood-fired barbecue enthusiast, and a dog lover, and perhaps a future Rotarian. So please, welcome to the club today, Ahmad Thomas.
Thank you, Suzanne, for that very kind introduction. And members of the Rotary Club, the distinguished guests here, thank you so much for having me. This is only the second time in 2 years that I've been in front of a crowd. So I don't know if that's a warning or disclaimer. We'll see how this goes, but I appreciate your grace. What I'd like to do here today, really 3 things will gate my remarks. First, I'd like to introduce myself so we can get to know each other a little bit better. I know I've been fortunate to meet many of you, but there are also many folks who I haven't had a chance to meet. So I'll introduce myself. Second, I'll speak about Svlg, our value set, really the set of priorities and work plan for 2022. Then a quick recap of some of our accomplishments where I believe we're putting the words and talk into action. I hope the new year has started well for all of you. And again, thank you very much for having me here. It means a lot. And I think in 2022, I thought about this and went kind of back and forth on whether I'd be here in person or not. My wife is a physician, and we've had folks on our team who have been picking up the bugs going around. But I think we are at a stage where we're vaccinated, we're boosted, we follow protocols, and try to move to a new normal, which is very important, I think, in 2022 and setting that example. So a little bit about myself here to start. I'm a Californian born and raised, a small town California from a military family. My dad was last stationed at Vandenberg Air Force Base, Vietnam vet, 23 years in the service. I grew up in Lompoc, California, outside of the base. My mother is West Indian from Trinidad and Tobago. I don't know if we have any folks from the Caribbean here. And my dad was born and raised in rural Alabama in the segregated South, where we've had family dating back to the Civil War. So I hope that that background has really helped to shape me as a leader, shape what I hope is really an authenticity around belonging and diversity and inclusion and trying to make a difference in our community. Suzanne spoke to my professional experience, which is investment. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. Not the mic, got to be under 6 feet for this thing to work out. So I hope what I shared earlier was heard by everyone. If it wasn't, I can start over. Nod of heads. Do I go at it again or just keep rolling? Okay. All right. So Suzanne did a very nice job of sharing my professional background, which I think is unique for organizations like this. You often don't have business leaders or business executives leading business groups. So I hope that that's been a competitive advantage that I've been able to use to help our member companies and executives over this last year. For Silicon Valley Leadership Group, I know we're an organization that you all know very well. I believe we are California's most dynamic business association. We've got 350 member companies, every major technology brand in the Valley, virtually every major technology company is a member of this organization, many startups, mid-sized employers. So we have a lot, fortunately, of influence and engagement and really try to use all of that member engagement as a force for good. We're focused on a range of policy priorities for our members throughout the region in Sacramento, countywide, not just Santa Clara County, but San Mateo County, and in DC, from affordable housing to corporate tax policy to antitrust issues, as well as housing, education, healthcare, transportation, and climate, just to name a few. Policy is just one very important component of SVLG's work. We're also working to transform the face of business leadership and promote a more diverse and inclusive working environment where all Valley residents can thrive. I truly believe the time has come for a new vision of corporate citizenship, a new era of Silicon Valley leadership. As CEO of SVLG, I see my role as a change agent, striving to catalyze this new vision of business leadership, one that embodies accountability, equity, inclusion, and environmental stewardship, as well as an entrepreneurial approach to both policy and our public and private investments. So turning to 2022 and the work plan to give you a better sense of where I'm focused, where many of our members and executives and board members are focused, we're really gated around 3 items. First is business competitiveness and strengthening the competitiveness of our region. We know Silicon Valley is recognized around the world for a wealth of innovative companies and entrepreneurial culture. But I think perhaps more than ever before, our value proposition is really threatened. It's threatened by the moment that we're in, which I think is a real inflection point coming out of COVID. And as someone who I hope is relatively analytical and someone with a finance background, I like to do cost-benefit analyses. And I think that that competitive advantage California has had, which has never been based on cost. You all know we're always an expensive place to live and do business. But with the optionality that remote work affords, I think the delta we have in terms of separating ourselves from Florida and Texas and other places where we compete is smaller than it's ever been before. So it's very, very important that our tax policies, that our policies that support investment, that's supporting venture as well where appropriate and possible be done. And I think it's more important than ever before. When we double click and break down where those areas of focus are, where we can really move the needle to try and maintain our competitive advantage, I think affordable housing is probably at the top of that list. You all have been hearing about this for decades. It's no surprise. As I noted, it's expensive to live here. What I think is unique is that we now have a potential toolkit to bring in more institutional capital, more private capital to help solve our problems. And often that's done in the form of social impact financing or ESG, environment, social governance related debt. SVLG has been a longtime champion for housing and housing affordability. I'm grateful to sit on the board of the Silicon Valley Housing Trust, which SVLG was instrumental in creating. We continue to advocate for high density, mixed use development near rail and high quality transit. And I'm hopeful this year we'll be able to carry legislation related to building permitting and being able to streamline that process, which we know when it comes to getting new units up and shovels in the ground is a big issue locally and frankly a big issue across the state. Transportation is another key area where SVLG has demonstrated strong leadership. As we head into the new year, we'll continue to provide robust engagement in regional transit recovery planning with MTC and operating agencies and elected officials, including advocating for transit priority and a much more seamless integrated Bay Area transit system. We're also committed to leading and participating actively in discussions for regional transportation funding measure, including consideration of operations funding. Healthcare is clearly a huge focus as we emerge from this pandemic, and our members are focused on promoting innovation and growth areas and advocating for policies that help healthcare providers, biotech companies, genomics companies, and research institutions bring transformative technologies to the community. Another thing that we found, which I hope hasn't really come as a surprise, is quite a severe gap in inequities in healthcare within our communities here in Silicon Valley. So we're creating a health equity working group at SVLG to put a group of executives together and around a table to try and develop, whether they be solutions related to direct giving and investment or policy-related solutions, to try and close that health equity gap, which is quite significant. I think the pandemic has, as I noted, proved as an inflection point and caused so much strife and pain in our communities, particularly communities of color, marginalized communities, those who aren't well off. But I think there's also been opportunities, and there's also been spotlight provided on areas where we really should be focusing more. And I think health equity is one of those areas. And finally, I would note around taxes, trying to take a sensible approach to tax policy, particularly at the local level, we believe is very important. When we talk about competitive advantage and companies moving and going to other states, first of all, I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I don't mean to be dismissive in any way of what you read about Exodus. I believe it's a very significant issue that we're focused on, enhancing California's value proposition. But I believe that planning and forecasting and budgeting needs to have a little more focus and attention from leaders in Sacramento and leaders regionally. When you're a CEO or a CFO and you know that your tax basis, you know that your operating costs are going to be X for the next 2 or 3 years, it's much easier to plan and understand where you might be expanding and scaling. When you don't have that certainty, it's much harder. What I hope and what I would argue as a rule of thumb is, at least near term as we emerge from this pandemic, it's not a time to increase costs on businesses. And when we look at Sacramento in particular and business-related taxes, I, for one, would not be supportive of going that direction in 2022. So those are some of the priorities that we're looking at the kind of policy level locally and in Sacramento. That doesn't touch on DC as much. Another big priority for us has been DEI and diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're trying to advance a bold agenda around DEI, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because we believe there's a business imperative for our companies in doing so. I believe our companies can be more competitive with more diverse leadership teams. And I think the business research and literature bears that out quite clearly. I tried to bring that to SVLG with my own leadership and approach. We've done a few things that I want to bring to your attention that I think you'll be hearing a lot about, I hope, in 2022. One is the Pledge 25 by 25 initiative, where companies like Twitter, Genentech, Silicon Valley Bank, the 49ers, Western Digital, and others have committed that by 2025, at least 25% of their leadership will be comprised of individuals from underrepresented groups. There's also commitments around funding and around education, unconscious bias training, which I think will be very important, because when you make changes at the top, you can get a ripple effect, I think, much more quickly often than people anticipate in the hires and what those teams look like after the leadership changes are made. And I think that's maybe a good segue to talk about our values in action, where I can speak about DEI in a little more detail. The scope and urgency of the challenges we face underscore the need for this new vision of Silicon Valley leadership, I think now more than ever before. Rather than just talking and saying a lot of nice things, I hope they've come across well. It feels like I might be a little bit rushed up here, but I told you this is my first time in front of a crowd in a little while. I'll share 5 specific things that we have done on behalf of our member companies over the past year that I hope convey the authenticity around the change that we're trying to drive and what we're trying to capture in this moment. First, we announced a very ambitious program with UNCF, the United Negro College Fund, last month. We had the president of Spelman, of Fisk, the CEO of the United Negro College Fund, and others get together to announce an exchange whereby we would have groups of CEOs on a quarterly basis from Silicon Valley meeting with HBCU presidents to find opportunities to place HBCU STEM graduates in internship, externship, and full-time opportunities. We need more STEM talent. Of course, we work in DC and have for many years to try and find ways to use legislation and legislative tools to afford more opportunities for talent. We also have opportunities right here at home to bring more diverse STEM leaders into our workforce. I'm very committed to doing so, and I think that comprises another data point of where we can make our companies more competitive. We launched the Next Generation Business Network last year, which is a board diversity training program. We've got 40 fellows that are going through that program from the top affinity groups across the country, like Boulay and the Latino Corporate Directors Association, to try and build a next generation of leaders who can sit on boards for our companies here in Silicon Valley. A third thing is our launch circuit, which is startups. Traditionally, we've done, I think, a very good job of serving especially the larger employers in Silicon Valley. I see a real opportunity for us in bringing more startups into this ecosystem, for doing demo days with our startups, with angel investors and venture capital funds, and with our CEOs and other executives looking to invest. I think there's a real opportunity to provide access for capital for marginalized entrepreneurs. And when I use that term, I not only mean Black and brown founders, but military veterans, LGBTQ women, and others who have not, believe it or not, had the same opportunities to access capital as many others you see who have been so successful. We've got a cohort of leading CEOs who created a Clean Climate Collective to really work to try and advance a positive vision in DC and within the region around climate. And lastly, if you look at the bills that we've supported, and this is where I'll close, we have done some things on behalf of our member companies that are different, and I think show a sense of purpose and vision and direction that I hope is not just setting a pace here in California, but setting a pace across corporate America. You had legislation in California that mandated racial diversity on corporate boards. Turns out SVLG was the only major business group in California to come out and support that bill, which seems like a bit of a no-brainer, and the governor signed it into law, and I made calls and others to try and advance that, but we were the only one. We had legislation that would decertify police that really stepped over the line, of course, not anti-law enforcement, but really egregious conduct. And SVLG was the only major business group in California that came out and endorsed that legislation, which was signed into law by the governor, SB 2. Locally, we came out around measures that allow affordable housing to be funded via private financing and institutional investors with joint powers agreements, which also is something that we have been one of the leaders around. So there's a great deal of opportunity for us in 2022. I've been very fortunate. Carl Gordino led this organization for over 20 years. He's been someone who built such a great brand for SVLG and built so many wonderful relationships for us in the community. David Packard, before him, who founded SVLG in 1977, was such a tremendous visionary. So it's truly humbling to step into this role. I know it's much bigger than me, which is one thing that I kind of don't like, because you just understand how much weighs on you being successful. It's fine when it's just me, but I feel like there's so many in the community really relying on me to be successful for them, because they don't have a chance to speak before audiences like this. So that is one thing that adds a fair amount of personal pressure to the role. But I've enjoyed it. It's been 15 months, and I hope we can partner. I hope we'll have opportunities to have lunches and find ways to really partner with SVLG to help you all, help the community, help with community service. And if you run a business and you think SVLG would be a fit for you and your work in the innovation economy, always please reach out. But thank you very much. I can go to questions if appropriate, but thank you.
And I wanted to ask you two things. One is, yes,
May I interrupt for a moment?
yes,
I'm sorry, but you'll be first. Just a reminder to everyone, red badgers get to move to the front of the line. So Fernando's first, but we'll let Fernando, please, you can finish it. Really. But a reminder every week during my presidency, if you have a red badge, please move to the front of the line for questions. So Rich and then Fernando.
It's a tough crowd, and not, sharp elbows, yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Richard Agiloni, proudly wearing the red badge, and I am executive director of an organization in Santa Clara called JW House. And we are a healthy organization, fortunate to have a lot of families and individuals and foundations that support us. But what we don't receive, and when I say we, I mean all of the other .orgs out there, we don't really get attention from Silicon Valley companies. If you're not providing, food, shelter, or math and science, I mean, that seems to be the hierarchy now for Silicon Valley philanthropy. And I would like the message for your member organizations is that there are many other worthy causes out there. There's healthcare and behavioral health and arts and culture and libraries and JW House and so many other organizations that can't seem to get the attention of Silicon Valley companies these days. As I said, it's food insecurity, homelessness, and math and science.
But yeah, I appreciate that very much. And I think that's Janica behind the mask. What you shared is very relevant to our foundation work. I kept these remarks focused on the leadership group, and it's something I'd love to follow up around. Janica, I mentioned her because she sits on that board.
That's literally, hi Ahmad,
Hey,
good to see you in person. That's literally what I was going to say is take a moment to tell what the foundation does, because I think you're missing a part of that skill.
Oh yeah, well, we had a huge success, which thanks to Janica and so many members of the foundation team, Chris Weiler, our race director, we did have a virtual turkey trot this year, although we're coming back in 2022, and we're able to raise $500,000 to help. Now, as you say, it is focused around food insecurity, housing, Healthier Kids Foundation with Kathleen King, but a tremendous amount of money to help folks out in need during a time where a lot of people need it. It's something I'm very, very proud of that we were able to do for the community in 2022 and 2021 and 2020 virtually.
Hey guys, I'm just going to interrupt real quick with a couple of Zoom questions. We've got about 80 people watching on Zoom, so we want to make sure that we're inclusive of those folks. And then I believe Fernando's next. Sorry. Just trying to track the action here. Ahmad, how do you interpret the verdict against Elizabeth Holmes in regard to board integrity and future VC investments?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any insight that's helpful around the verdict, and I'm an MBA, not a lawyer, but I would say the deeper message about board oversight, about active engagement from board members around this new era of board responsibility, which, as you see, shareholders have. Some shareholders have diversity, equity, and inclusion requirements. Some large institutions have ESG and climate-related environments. I think it's just a reminder that for those serving on boards, the bar is being raised higher. I think there are expectations around leadership and oversight that clearly weren't met there, where we have more awareness around board members fulfilling those oversight responsibilities. If you I got to hear John Carrier, who wrote the book Bad Blood, speak about his experiences in detail, and it's an interesting recounting of it. And again, I don't know enough of the specifics about Theranos, but from a business ethics standpoint, I think it's a great case study for where a board member or where a leader sees something wrong, while you may not, being silent can be being complicit. And I think there's a takeaway from this case that you have to be more active in taking those oversight roles. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Ahmad. Appreciate it.
Hi, Elizabeth Chin Hill. I'm a Red Badger. Sorry for the interruption. And
hi, it's nice to meet you, Elizabeth.
Hello. Yeah, I had this San Jose Downtown Resident Association, and much of our engagement with the city, and probably more regionally also, is about the public transportation development in San Jose. So, we're having kind of our own seamless integration of high-speed rail, the BART, and the Caltrain in San Jose. So when you mentioned that you're looking for the seamless integration of transportation within the Bay Area, I was just wondering if you can elaborate a little bit in that regard. Thank you.
I mean, you said it better than I could. I mean, that's a perfect example. And when you talk about, the Downtown West project with Google, right, where we were heavily engaged, you've got another very good opportunity in the years to come to really have a transit hub that I think can be critically important to feeding and nurturing the Silicon Valley economy. Now, where I think there are sometimes challenges, obviously it's around finding the money. These projects are quite expensive. And as we've seen around some of the local projects, the price tag will often, continue to increase. COVID has played a role in that. Google took a very innovative approach. Now they're fortunate and they have the wherewithal and resources to do so, but their process being so encompassing and being so collaborative with the community, I think really paid off. So they actually have a community investment fund that went along with that development. Now, the criteria for how that fund will operate are being developed right now. I don't know if there'd be transit-related monies in there. But beyond what you said around seamless integration, I think the biggest challenge we face is probably twofold. One is looking at work patterns and work migration patterns coming out of COVID. I think many of our large employers are moving to hybrid work kind of plans and opportunities for their employers. Again, that doesn't need to mean a zero-sum game where you have downtowns like we see today that aren't as active as we all remember just a few years ago. But I think there will probably be differences in ridership and migration patterns. I think the second thing is just cost, right? And time value of money is significant. When projects can't come online for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 30 or 40 basis points in funding for several $100 million is very real money. And so we're trying to engage around solutions to cut that permitting time and also work on getting shovels in the ground faster where possible.
Thank you. I just want to add that there are some academic studies that transportation infrastructure does anchor high-tech companies in the city, like you said, like with Google to San Jose. So hopefully that will help to share some of the costs.
Yeah, you're talking about the multiplier effect, which there's a lot of good literature out there around that, and you can say for every dollar spent on infrastructure, for example, when we look at the federal infrastructure dollars in DC, there's a pretty significant return on investment, and it's a near-term return once those projects come online. The problem is getting them online quickly.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Another Zoom question here, Ahmad. What are some things business leaders could do to reduce NIMBYism that is greatly impacting the affordability of housing?
Wow, these are hard questions. So who do I look at on Zoom? Do I just stare into the distance? Is that the camera where they can see me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a really good question. I mean, I think, frankly, we need to try and move beyond that type of mindset. For me, it's always about value proposition and trying to be very clear on laying out, where communities stand to benefit. Beyond that, being transparent, being analytical, and try to be very data-driven in presenting information about projects, or even when I review that information. I don't think there's an easy answer to that question. I certainly don't have a magic bullet around that. Transparency, honesty, data-driven approach, I think can be helpful, but it goes much deeper than that.
My questions are a lot easier. What are the reactions and responses of your members to the exodus of companies like Tesla and Oracle and Hewlett-Packard, and news of billion-dollar projects going on in New Mexico and in the East? The other question I had was, what effect do your members think will be on them with respect to the anticipated ongoing problems with our weather, the droughts that we can anticipate will continue into the future?
These are the easy questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good luck with that, Ahmad.
No, well, the first piece of that is vitally important. And I would break I'd break my response down into a few components. And it's a great question that you asked. The first, which I think it's important to reiterate, certainly in my estimation, this is not a zero-sum game when we look at competitiveness from region to region or state to state. I believe the innovation infrastructure of our country, the innovation infrastructure of Silicon Valley, is robust enough that we can continue to grow at a rapid clip and try to grow more equitably while Texas and Florida and other places do well. But I think the specific companies that you mentioned, what's very interesting is that while you will often see a corporate headquarters move, that is often followed by additional investment within our region. And Sam Liccardo does a very eloquent job of speaking to this, additional investment in San Jose particularly. So to me, that speaks to not an issue locally or not an issue with access to talent or all of those. If you guys are familiar with some of the innovation cluster technology, right? We've got 4 or 5 real core differentiators that make Silicon Valley such a great place to grow and do business. I don't believe that these companies leaving says that those core indicators are bad. I think it's saying that the operational cost structure of doing business here, and it's primarily a Sacramento issue, that the ability to forecast costs of doing business here, for some companies, there are political issues that get involved. I think it's more of a statement around that. And if you really dig into the data, you have a lot of individuals who are relocating within a broader radius in California or the greater Bay Area. So I think there's an importance of recognizing that we have an inflection point here with the optionality of remote work, in particular coming out of the pandemic, but also recognizing that there are points to leverage that allows Silicon Valley to remain very competitive. But it's this, I termed it, and I wrote an op-ed about this, the California value proposition, just recognizing that delta, which used to be higher, of the benefit of doing business here versus elsewhere, is getting smaller, in finding ways that we can ensure that we're increasing that value proposition. And I think even a straightforward statement of saying no new business taxes in 2022, right, would be an example of being able to set more certainty in place for business leaders. The climate question is deep and multi-layered. It's something that we're focused around. I'm not really familiar with a uniform approach yet that CEOs have taken, either around a specific piece of legislation or a climate solution per se. We did have the CEO of the UN Global Climate Compact speak to our members a few months ago. That's probably the biggest kind of global grouping of CEOs around climate. But even if you look at investor prospectus literature, you'll see that climate risk is now factored into considerations of the future prospects of our companies. Right? And that's undeniable.
I see a couple other Zoom questions. No one else is standing at the mic. I'll try and tackle one more easy question.
No, I'm joking. I really enjoy these conversations.
Good exercise, right? What's SVLG's position on the proposition, collecting signatures, that provides local land use and zoning laws overriding conflicting state laws, initiating constitutional amendment? There's a number here, 210016.
I don't believe SVLG has taken a position on that. I mean, it's something members can look at. We've got a process whereby our committees and board and executives bring. We don't get involved around the candidate endorsements, but we have taken positions on ballot measures, for example. But I don't believe there's a stance from SVLG on that.
Mr. President, would you like me to ask a question?
Ahmad, I have a question. I had a very good meeting yesterday with a VP of one of your members. And we were talking about people going back into the office. Sure. And I brought up the issue about productivity measurements that companies may have done and what kind of data they had there. And what was interesting to me was that he really deflected immediately beyond productivity onto all of these issues around social connection and social fabric, and how important it is for people to be in buildings together, living normal lives instead of being at home, et cetera, and how it was much bigger than just a productivity discussion. I'm wondering what kind of discussions you're having at the group, and if you could share anything with us.
That's a great question. It's a fascinating topic. There's a really good article that came out this week in Barron's from a Stanford GSB professor who studies this, and he writes about migration trends and kind of where the future might be going. And the takeaways there I don't think are surprising, but for more affluent, more educated workers, they've been able to avail themselves of a lot of flexibility with remote working and frontline working. My wife's a doctor, so I also get it for our healthcare frontline workers, it's been a tough couple of years for them. But for those kind of with less opportunity, they don't have those opportunities to work remotely. I think I would look at a few things in responding to that question. I think without a doubt, the synergies, the opportunity to build a team and get a team really aligned well around core objectives and goals is easier to do in person. I say that from experience because I stepped into this job in the middle of a pandemic. And I've had to spend much more time internally, building culture and communicating a set of leadership kind of traits and values than I would have anticipated. And I think had I been able to talk to folks in person, it probably would have taken half the time or less. Even just the check-ins and the review processes we do just require a lot more time now than we would have to do if we were in person. So there are a lot of inefficiencies. I also think what's very interesting is from an equity standpoint, there are findings that for people of color, there can be more comfort in a Zoom screen where you are all the same box and there's a certain sense of a level playing field. Bracken Darrell, the CEO of Logitech, interviewed Eric Yuan, the CEO of Zoom, for a program we did a few months ago. It's on YouTube, definitely worth checking that out. But they spoke about that and shared some of that data where you have reticence from certain individuals in underrepresented communities to come back because there are biases and other things that can come into play when you're in person versus all appearing relatively in an egalitarian fashion in boxes. But like the short answer to the question is I want to get back in person as soon as we can. That's part of the reason I'm here in person and not dialed in via Zoom. In 2022, I really want to commit to taking these opportunities to build the personal connections. And I think there's opportunity with hybrid work approaches to enhance efficiencies and drive revenue and profitability and market share, but also do it in manners that can foster team connection and also allow for investment in our downtowns, allow for our businesses to be filled to the level they should be. It's not an either or in my view.
Jenica, I'm sorry, you're getting hopped by a red badger. Octavia, do you want to take us out here with the last question?
Is your company helping people of color? How can we, because I do have a Octavia kitchen, and we don't see that funding, especially to people of color. How can your company help small businesses of people of color?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. It's a really good question. I think certainly at the individual level with our board members, of my own nonprofit involvement, I think that there's work being done that's positive. But look, I hope what you've seen is I try to be pretty honest and open in how we talk about these issues, especially around DEI. And the DEI work that I spoke about, whether it be more HBCU grads for our companies, more diverse boards, more diverse C-suites and leadership, that is not something that is targeted or directed at small businesses. Now, what I would hope is that in bringing individuals with different perspectives into leadership roles, that you would see grace and open hearts around supporting entities like yours and supporting entities that maybe have not gotten the shine that they deserve. What I could commit to you is if you want to share more about your operation with me, I'm glad to get that out on our social channels. This year, we're putting a community corner kind of series in place, and the guy in the back with the camera is one of the people leading that, if you want to get him after, where we want to try and showcase more leaders, because it's about building connections and networking and personal connections with our leaders and with nonprofit leaders like yourself. But I should be open. The policies that I spoke about aren't going to be helpful in that regard. It's the people that I hope we're bringing into these roles that will be open-hearted in their giving and engagement, which I hope I am.
Thank you so much, Ahmad, for being here in person and for everything that you shared. Back to you, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you so much. A real honor to be here today.
Thank you, Ahmad, and a donation in your name will be made to Health Rights 360, which I know you love dearly. That's a healthcare service that helps vulnerable citizens. Next week, our speaker will be Nicole Perelroth speaking on cybersecurity, and with that, meeting adjourned. Thank you.